A 10-year-old girl would be found brutally murdered on her mother's front porch. And although there were numerous witnesses, police couldn't seem to search down her killer. But before we get started, welcome to True Crime with Maneater. If you love all things true crime, including missing person cases, cold cases, and just the strange happenings of the world, you've come to the right place. Be sure to subscribe and turn on alerts so you never miss a video upload. Let's get started. Anna Palmer was a 10-year-old girl living in Salt Lake City, Utah, with her mother, Nancy Palmer. Salt Lake City is well known for its tourist industry, based primarily on skiing and outdoor recreation. Anna was described by her mother as a socialite who spent most of her time playing outside with the other children in the neighborhood. Anna was incredibly bright, well-rounded, and just an overall sweet little girl. One of Anna's best friends, who had known her since kindergarten, described Anna as very nice, outgoing, and not a mean bone in her body. September 10th, 1998 started off as any other day would in the Palmer household. Anna was up and getting ready to head off to her elementary school where she was a 5th grader, and Nancy was doing the same. She was up and getting ready to head to work. After school that day, at around 5 p.m., Anna called her mother, who was still at work. She called her mom and she said, "Hey, can I go play with so-and-so?" And her mother's like, "Yeah, of course, I'll be home around this time and I'll see you then." I'm sure Nancy didn't think anything about letting Anna go play with her friends that day. It was something that she had done countless times, and Nancy trusted Anna. Anna was a well-rounded, well-behaved, very smart little girl. And the neighborhood was a very close, tight community. They watched out for each other's children, they knew each other, they knew who was playing where. All seemed well and safe, so Nancy would have no issues sending her little girl to play with her friends. Nancy would hang up the phone, go back to work, confident that when she got home from work that day, her and Anna would sit down to dinner and tell each other about their days. Anna would visit a friend a little after that phone call was made, and wouldn't begin her journey home until around 6:50 p.m. Nancy would arrive home about 40 minutes later. As Nancy parks her car and she's approaching the porch, she notices that her daughter is lying on that covered porch. And at that moment, her heart sank. She knew that her only daughter was dead. Nancy would describe Anna's face as waxy, pale, and yellow, as if there was no blood flow. She would call 911 and attempted to do CPR as instructed by the 911 dispatchers. However, it wasn't working. Anna had a hole in her throat. The 911 dispatchers told Nancy to try putting her hand over the wound and attempt to do CPR that way. Although paramedics arrived shortly after the phone call, Anna was taken to the hospital where she was pronounced dead. The autopsy would later reveal that Anna had been stabbed at least 5 times in the neck. There were multiple bruises on her head and upper torso. There was also physical evidence that she had been sexually assaulted. And of course, the neighborhood is in shock by this. A little girl was murdered in broad daylight on a quiet, safe street. It didn't make sense. And she wasn't dragged inside her home and murdered there. It was done on her covered porch, which seemed incredibly risky. Police would begin by putting a timeline together of Anna's movements. They know that on the day she died, she went to school as always. She came home. She called her mother around 5. She left home shortly after and arrived home at about 6:50 p.m. that night. Approximately 40 minutes after she arrived home, her mother would come home from work and discover her body. Police would go and interview the friend that Anna was with that night, and they learned some interesting information. When it was time for Anna to go home, the girls were headed to the corner of a street where they typically went their separate ways to go home. Anna's friend would tell investigators that the two of them noticed somebody following them home. As the girls are stopped waiting for this man to pass them, Anna looks at her friend and tells her to run home. This honestly made my heart sink. Anna knew that they were in trouble, and the first thing she did was try to protect her best friend. This is the little 10-year-old girl who knew something bad was going to happen, and it breaks my heart completely. Unfortunately, this was the last time that anyone saw Anna alive again. A 14-year-old girl would come forward and tell the police that she did see a man following the two little girls home that day. In spite of all of this information, police really didn't have anything to work with, so they offered an $11,000 reward for any information on who murdered Anna Palmer. Unfortunately, this would lead to no clues, no evidence, and no arrests. The case would go cold. Although the case went cold, Anna Palmer fought for her life, and because of that, DNA evidence was left behind. She had clawed and scratched at her attacker and had his DNA under her fingernails. But at that time, DNA wasn't far enough advanced to really test that evidence, but that all changed in 2009. In 2009, that same DNA led to a suspect, and that suspect's name was Matthew Breck. So police would dive in and try to find out where this man was. And they were in luck because he was serving time in prison. They found Matthew Breck in an Idaho prison for child molestation. And of course, at this point, bells are ringing in their head. This man is in prison right now for child molestation, and this man's DNA was under this 10-year-old girl's fingernails. They were absolutely certain that they had their man. Investigators would go to this prison and interview Matthew Breck, and he admitted to living in the same neighborhood as Anna at the time of her murder, but he didn't confess to the crime. In January of 2010, Matthew Breck was charged with aggravated murder, aggravated sex abuse of a child, which are both first-degree felonies, and child abuse, which is a second-degree felony in connection with Anna Palmer's death. During the trial, two separate witnesses would come forward who are now in their 20s. One of these girls was the friend that was with Anna on the day that she died. She would testify that her and Anna were pretty good friends and that the girls would often play together while Anna's mother, Nancy, was at work. She would say, "These aren't the memories I want to recall. It was a very emotional time, so I probably tried to suppress them." But prosecutors would play the tape from the interview with this little girl back in 1998. On the tape, this then little girl told police that her and Anna played together and swung in her backyard that afternoon. When it was just around 7 o'clock, the girls began to walk down the street and got to the corner. As they got to the corner, they stopped and hugged each other, and that's when they noticed a man was following them. Anna told her friend to just let the guy pass, and that's what he did. They kind of just moved out of his way, and he passed them by. In the video, the girl says, "When we're at 3rd East on September 10th, 1998, there was this guy behind us. I thought he might kidnap us or grab us from behind. He looked kind of strange or something." She said that she called to Anna to let the man pass them, and as he passed, he looked at Anna, and suddenly the girls knew that something was very wrong. She would say that her friend Anna told her to run home. She said, "I started running and looked back and he was gone. I kept looking back to see if Anna was getting home safely. I didn't think anything would happen to her." And the 14-year-old girl who also saw this man following the two girls would take the stand. At the time, she was 14 and she had just gotten a kitten, so she was showing her friends in the neighborhood this new kitten. And as she's doing so, she sees Anna and this other little girl being followed by a man. She would tell police she noticed a man wearing an unbuttoned baseball jersey bouncing from one side of the street to another across 300 East, attempting to hitchhike. Soon after, she noticed the man trailing Palmer. "He creeped me out personally. I looked back and Anna was walking home and he was still walking behind her like a crazy person. I looked again about a minute later and no one was there." She would describe a man in his teens who was bald in a white tank top. She said she saw the man was wearing a baseball jersey with 2 tattoos on his chest. He had dark and stringy hair. And at the time, witnesses said that Matthew Breck was known to wear baseball jerseys and white tank tops. Matthew Breck was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Although it was incredibly painful to hear what happened to her daughter on that day, Nancy Palmer would go on to say, "It's good to know. Instead of thinking about it, wondering, now we have at least some answers. The most important thing is that justice was done. Breck was held accountable and will be held for the rest of his life." This is an incredibly sad and distressing case, not only because it was a 10-year-old girl, but because this 10-year-old girl knew that something was wrong. I can't imagine the fear that she felt as she's looking at this man who passes by her and is staring at her. She knew that something was bound to happen. and she must have been terrified. Quite frankly, it felt like a crime of opportunity. I'm not sure that he went out looking that day, though I could be wrong. It doesn't seem like he did any interviews. Police didn't really release that much information about it. But I do feel like it was a crime of opportunity. This man saw two vulnerable little girls walking together. He stalked them and then would brutalize the little girl and end up murdering her. He could have very well been out looking for a little girl that day, but for some reason it sticks out to me that Anna was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Or perhaps he wasn't hitchhiking and that was just a guise so that he could hurt a little girl. I don't know. There isn't a lot of information out there about Matthew Breck. Obviously, he is a child predator and he should never be released from police custody. But given the fact that he murdered a little girl while he was in his teens, and then when they found him all that time later, he was serving prison time for child molestation, makes me think that he at least has some more victims that police don't know about. But that's it for today, guys. If you like this video or any other video on my channel, be sure to subscribe and turn on alerts so you never miss a video upload. If there's a case you'd like me to cover, pop in the comments below, and I'll be sure to get to it. In the meantime, check out some other videos on my channel while you wait for the next upload, and I'll see you then.